Hey, what's up everybody? Thanks for tuning in for another episode of our live video cast. Something we've been doing for the last few weeks for our 18 to 22 year olds at Crosspoint Church, but obviously, as we've said, everyone is welcome to tune in anytime. I want to give a shout out to our group that's meeting at NC State tonight, which reminds me, one of the things that we want to do and want you guys to jump in on and do is to, if there's two or three of you on your campus or two or three people that you're close with that you would like to kind of get together with and watch these together with, we would really love that. That's kind of a part of what we want to do here is to create content for you to then discuss with those around you. So whether you're at ECU or UNC Asheville or out in Idaho or California, wherever you are, to provide you with something to kind of encourage you and to give you an opportunity to kind of discuss some things. And so if you're looking to do that, if you contact me, I will send you questions in advance so that after the video cast you guys have some stuff to discuss. So feel free to do that. As we jump into our third video cast, we've been trying to figure out what we're going to call this thing, and Sharon has suggested Miller Time.
You didn't tell me we were going to talk about this.
If you feel strongly for or against that, let us know.
We didn't want to call it video cast.
Yeah.
So I came up with Miller Time. So if you like that, then send us some thumbs up. But if you don't like that, then send us alternatives because we are not good at this.
All right. So tonight's topic, as we've advertised, is why The Bachelor is not reality. In parentheses, why The Bachelor is a lie.
I wanted to call it Why The Bachelor is a Lie. He said that was too harsh.
That was a little harsh. So.
All right, we're already getting Miller Time.
Miller Time, yeah. So as we dig into that, one kind of caveat, one thing to tell up front is we're not here to bash The Bachelor. We actually watch it ourselves and get sucked into all of the drama.
Yeah, a lot of people were concerned when they saw that was the topic that we were going to come on and say that basically like you're a bad Christian for watching it. But if that's true, then we're bad Christians because we totally watch it.
Yeah. So just be at ease, be at rest. But, part of the reason we wanted to do this and asking the question, why does it matter that we talk about this, is because we've had way too many conversations where someone has said something to the effect of, well, the relationship just didn't work out because it didn't feel like what The Bachelor feels like or what The Bachelorette seems like it would feel like. Having friends with relationships that have ended and that being a reason why is that it just didn't feel like The Bachelor or The Bachelorette. And so we felt like it was something that really needed to be talked about, at least in the extent of what is realistic to draw from it and what is not. And so wanted to jump in there. Do you want to jump in here and share a little bit about why this matters?
Yeah, first I'm giving a shout out to Emily, who is one of my major Bachelor sources of information, and she said she's watching this instead of Dancing with the Stars, and so I take that as a huge compliment. So we know some people that have compared their relationships to The Bachelor, and I have this distinct memory. I think this was from about a year ago when Ike and we got a stomach virus at the same time. And one thing that, you don't really prepare for is when you both are that sick at the same time and you have children. And somebody has to watch the children. You can't just let them roam free. And so I had this memory of us both being just sick as dogs. And so we went upstairs, we shut all the doors, we put up gates, and we just kind of gated in our kids while he and I just laid on the floor, just holding our stomachs and moaning and groaning. And I remember looking at Ike and saying, they don't show this on The Bachelor. And for me, in a lot of ways, that just sums up the difference between The Bachelor and then real life. Just the fantasy of it. Whenever you hear them talking about, she could be the mother of my children, or, one day we're going to have babies together. And I can just imagine them, they're probably picturing this Norman Rockwell photo or, this pristine, beautiful picture of holding a baby. And, what they're not thinking of is getting pooped all over, or just or how sleep deprivation frays your nerves, and it's not that having kids isn't wonderful, because it is, but it's just not. I don't think it's what they're picturing, and it's certainly not what The Bachelor is necessarily setting them up for. And I think that can actually create a lot of problems if you sort of have these expectations and then you go into a relationship. It can really undermine what you think your marriage is supposed to be, and create a lot of problems down the road, which is why we decided to address it.
Yeah. So there's a few things just getting into this as to why The Bachelor is not realistic. First of all, I don't know how many people actually are flown to exotic locations in a helicopter for a date, just for a date, you know.
Yeah.
That seems a little bit unrealistic.
That's only happened to us like a couple times.
I mean, maybe once a year if we're lucky, you know. If it's a bad year, we skip a year, but otherwise, yeah. There's no crazy expensive dates, you know, for the most part, or at least not every single day for 6 months or whatever.
Yeah.
Another part of it is that one of the things that you don't get to see in The Bachelor is what love looks like over time. You know, you don't get to see what love looks like in day-to-day life, where you've got stress, where you've got work, where you've got competing priorities, relationships, friends, things that you're, you know, involved with. You don't get to see any of that. It's just you're in, you know, vacation land in this great place.
Well, and there's a lot of pressure to fall in love very, very quickly. You know, it's like week 5 and the Bachelor or Bachelorette's complaining, well, so-and-so hasn't told me they love me yet. And, you know, I just don't know if they're all in. It's like 5 weeks, you know, what in the world? You know, that's actually, pick that person, you know. They're probably the healthy one. So, you know, that's like another thing that's really unrealistic.
Yeah. The other part about it too is you have the interesting dynamic of the competition. And so there's almost this like pressure to express feelings that you probably wouldn't have in a normal context. But because you're competing for this person's affections, you feel this need to express more feelings than you normally have, maybe more than you feel like is healthy to express. And then you begin to believe that's actually how you feel. And if you were to step out of that reality and realize, there was a lot of pressure that was making me feel that way. Another thing is, I mean, as a guy, the idea of having 25 women at your own, kind of like focused completely on you, vying for your affections, it's not realistic. Just say it.
I mean, I think most people know that.
So, just need to make sure that was clear. I think sometimes it's a little distorted.
Yeah. Well, and another thing that I have just always been baffled by is, you know, you have this guy or this girl that's kissing all these people, hooking up with all these people, and then there's kind of like a cutoff date where that just ends, and then they pick one, and then they just move into another relationship, and they kind of make it seem like, you know, their feelings for all the other people are just gone, that all that hooking up isn't affecting this new relationship, that when they see all those people, you know, at future like Bachelor shows, that everybody's cool and everyone's fine. But I think that's also totally unrealistic. And the one thing that is interesting about it is it's not realistic for someone to be hooking up with, you know, so many people at once, and for that to be like socially acceptable, I would say. But what you do see on The Bachelor is almost like an intensified version of the entirety of a person's dating life, kind of like concentrated into 6 weeks. And so I think in some ways we do get to see, it's like you're seeing before your very eyes someone's past dating history, which we do. A lot of us who don't marry our first boyfriend or girlfriend, we bring that in. And the reality is, that's probably a huge reason why a lot of these relationships don't work out, is because you can't just leave that stuff behind. And I think that's true of, you know, real life as well. Not that we can't, you know, get over our past relationships, but it is something that you have to deal with and work through, and it's actually very painful. But you just don't see any of that in The Bachelor. And then one other thing that's not realistic is simply just that The Bachelor is heavily edited. You know, they edit the storylines so that you create villains, so there's always kind of like a crazy person, and
Well, Ashley was legitimately crazy. Okay, let's just be honest.
Whatever.
And Chad.
All
right. Gaston.
So anyway, yeah, just the editing is also like very manipulative. It's manipulative towards the people on the show, but it's also manipulative of the viewer. And so just to have like very wide open eyes about that as well.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing though, and this is what we see kind of happen every season, or most seasons, maybe not every season because there have been some that have gotten married, but it seems to be this consistent thing where the relationship doesn't last much longer after the show ends. That there's something about the way that this is set up that it just can't sustain a relationship for very long. And I think a part of that is because the whole relationship has been about how does this person make me feel and how do they compare to the other people in the way that they're expressing their feelings. Who's expressing themselves the most? Who seems to be the most into me? Who seems to make me feel the best? And at the end of the day, that relationship is not going to last because that relationship is purely based on what does it do for me. And so it's really not a relationship at all. It's more of sort of a pharmaceutical relationship. You meet certain needs. You fix certain things for me. You do certain things for me. But in reality, that's not really a relationship. So what do you think about that? And just kind of how does that sustain a relationship? Is it possible for that to sustain a relationship?
Like what happens on The Bachelor?
Yeah.
Is that possible? Well, like you said, I mean, obviously, I think it is possible for there to be relationships that come out of it because we have seen relationships come out of it. But I think, you know, just being wide-eyed about all that is kind of stacked against them and the fact that most of these don't work out, I think just goes to show that there's a lot of... For me, when I watch this... One of the reasons I watch The Bachelor and The Bachelorette is purely as like a guilty pleasure, so I'm not going to try and like spiritualize it. But another reason, because it's like
drop a Bible verse every now and then.
Seriously entertaining. I'm like really sucked in, but it's also just really interesting commentary on wisdom and foolishness and human nature and. Just watching the ways that people, you know, try and justify things to themselves or,
manipulate puppets.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's hard to say, like, you know, whether or not, I mean, some of it, too, just comes down to who did they end up choosing in the end? Like, are they choosing for the right reasons? Because there's been times when the Bachelor or Bachelorette chose someone where you just knew, like, that you chose the person that was, you know, the hottest or... you know, that you know, it wasn't like, it clearly wasn't like a great decision-making process. But even when it's a good choice, I think it's really like stacked against you for a lot of reasons.
Yeah, so, you know, at the end of the day, we see a lot of these don't work out because it's not really about the relationship. It's about how does it make me feel? What's the most exciting thing in this that's happening right now? So, you know, turning then to what Scripture has to say or what faith has to say about relationships and how we think about them. What is a better depiction of reality?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, well, one thing I was going to just add in terms of sustaining a relationship, I think that, you know, we talked before about expectations and how damaging that can be if you go into a relationship with expectations that are really disconnected from reality. And this can even happen even, you know, as a married couple. This isn't just for single people watching The Bachelorette and dreaming about what romance should be like. It can also be a temptation for married people who are watching it thinking, gosh, you know, we don't have that kind of romance. We don't have that kind of passion or that kind of chemistry or, you know, I could see how it'd be really easy to watch it and sort of yearn for what you're seeing on TV. And that's a really, it's a really dangerous game to play when you start thinking, you know, my life isn't what it should be or what it could be. As soon as you start walking down that path, it's a really, you know, dangerous path to walk down. But one thing that we had been talking about the other day when we were discussing this is one of the lies of The Bachelor is that the beauty of marriage is beauty. That it's, you know, everyone's always looks good. Everyone's dressed up.
Well, I do always look pretty good.
Every day is, you know, spectacular. You know, everything is beautiful, and that is the beauty of marriage. But really, the beauty of marriage is not always beautiful. And I think that we're not taught the role actually of hardship in marriage and the role of suffering in marriage. And so to get to your question, one scriptural teaching that I think of is Ephesians 5:25. Husbands, love your wives just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. And that relationship between Christ and the church, that is our example and our paradigm for marriage. And when we look to that example, what we see is a Savior who, was humiliated and hung on a cross. And what I think that should do is actually set us free. Because what it reminds us is that when suffering comes, when hardship comes, when conflict comes, it's so easy to be really startled by it or to be really scared by it and to think, gosh, are we doing something wrong? Is this the right relationship? Did I choose the wrong person? And with scripture pointing us to Jesus in the church, he's, in a sense, scripture saying, no, suffering actually has a place. Hardship has a place. That's okay. You don't have to be afraid of it. And that it's actually through suffering, through weakness, that you are actually made stronger. And that is a big part of the beauty of marriage, is that God, leads you through these difficult times, leads you through trials, and then you actually come out on the other side stronger. That's the beauty. But when you're in the middle of it, it doesn't feel that way at all. It just feels scary and hard, and you don't want to deal with it, and you wonder, if you're doing the right thing. But just to say that that's actually very normal. Not to say that you should seek out hardship, that if you're dating someone and it's hard all the time, that's a bad sign. But once you're married, just to know that a healthy marriage is going to endure conflict, and that's not a sign of necessarily anything being wrong.
Yeah, so sacrifice is a big category when it comes to what the reality of a relationship is, and not in the sense of like it's just gonna be hard. If it's gonna be a good relationship, it's gonna be hard, but more in the sense of like what sustains a relationship is sacrifice. What sustains a mutual relationship is mutual sacrifice. That you're genuinely both sacrificing for the other, recognizing that you're both human beings that are in need of each other's grace, and sacrifice for the other. One morning, this was when our youngest son was probably 3 months old, and Sharon had a long night, and we'd had a long night. He'd been up a lot, and so I just said, Sharon, just go to bed. This was about 4 o'clock in the morning. I said, go to bed, sacrificing for my wife here, and so I take Cohen, and I've got him and letting her go to bed, and I'm just playing with Cohen, just trying to keep him happy, and I pick him up, and I've got him over my head, and he just throws up right into my mouth.
I didn't know you were going to share this story.
And in that moment I said, this is sacrifice. This is love. This is a story we're going to be telling for years and years to come. If you don't have kids, we promise it's good. But now it's a great story. You're laughing. You're like, that's disgusting. But again, those are the stories that you live to tell, because they're just, in the moment, they're awful. Later down the road, you're like, it's so funny.
And that's a good point. I mean, sacrifice is a lot of what makes a marriage work, and you don't really see that on The Bachelor a whole lot. Like, I don't know if there's even like a category for that on The Bachelor. There's just a lot of kind of...
Yeah, I think the other thing about The Bachelor is that
sacrificing your dignity.
There's a lot of words, but there's not a lot of action. Because you're in a certain space, you're not going to be there very long, and so all you can offer is words. You can't show action over a long time. You can't show. All you can say is, "I promise to be committed to you," but that's something that only bears itself out over time. And so those are really, the reality of a relationship, and what makes it strong and what sustains it is integrity, those actions over time, that love over time. So that's kind of where we come down in terms of thinking through what does a reality look like versus maybe what The Bachelor portrayals as reality and love. A big verse I think to end on would be the 1 Corinthians 13, love is patient, love is kind, does not envy, does not boast, it is not rude, it is not self-seeking,
not easily angered.
So for me, gets more to the heart of, in all of those things, it's about how we treat the other person. In all of those things, love is about how we treat the other person. It's not about what do we get out of it. And so when it comes to our marriage relationships, our dating relationships, the real test of love when it comes to those things is how are we bearing out love towards them versus the question of, well, do I feel like I'm in love because I'm being treated a certain way? I'm receiving certain things from them.
Yeah, so I would say in terms of 2 takeaways, if you watch The Bachelor, how to kind of like filter it, I would say the first is to watch it almost the way you would watch any other non-reality show, not to watch it as, you know, a reflection of what marriage or relationship should be like, and to just kind of have it like that. But I would say that with maybe like one qualification, is that if you ever are watching it and you recognize something of yourself in what you're seeing on screen, that might be a great opportunity to just, you know, sometimes it's easier to see yourself in other people and to kind of understand yourself, you know, when you see your own tendencies in other people. And so maybe pay attention to that, because when I watch The Bachelor, I'm reminded of like the book of Proverbs, basically, which just talks over and over and over again about the way of the fool and foolishness and wisdom, and the fool is on the path to destruction, and the wise person is on the path to life. And so I think we can actually also learn a lot about foolishness, but in terms of it crafting your expectations, if you ever find yourself where it's shaping your expectations, to just, you know, notice that, and if it's really becoming a struggle, maybe take a break from it because that might not be, you know, healthy for you as a person. Yeah.
All right, well, we'll wrap it up there. We already have one question, but if anybody has questions, feel free to throw those in. One person has asked, they would like to know what each of our favorite bachelors or bachelorettes were. Do you have one in mind?
I mean, I love Sean and
Yeah,
Catherine.
yeah, that's mine too. Yeah.
Yeah, I think Ike wants to be friends with him in real life.
Bros. Bros before Rose. Okay?
So, yeah, I think that's... And then...
All right. What other questions? Any other questions?
I was trying to think if there's any other seasons that I really liked.
I do have to say I was surprised by his choice, though. I didn't see Catherine.
Oh, really?
Coming. She kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
Cinderella story. Made her run to the end.
All right. Any other questions?
All right. Well, as always, feel free to continue the conversation by sending messages or commenting on the video itself. And you can contact me, Ike, at crosspoint.org. Always love to continue the conversation in person or online, whatever we can do. And look forward to seeing you next week, 8 o'clock, right here on Facebook Live.